Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at the select statement, how to actually select data from our database. The videos have been adjusted slightly, so some of these may or may not be in sync, but nevertheless the data will still be pretty much relevant. So let's go ahead and get started. So in our AdventureWorks database, uh, we want to find a table that actually has data. Doesn't matter if if you select the database log or one of these others. Just find one that has data. What you're going to do is right click, and then we're just going to select top 1000 rows, and we're going to kind of dig into what that means. So as we see here, it pre-generated some code for us, or instruction, aka query. So we see the keyword select, and then we also see another keyword called top, and then we see a value, and then we have all this, and then we have our from, and then we have this stuff. So let's break this down. So a query just simply means instruction. So you're giving it instructions, and that's all we do in SQL is we give the computer instructions to go out to retrieve data for us. So let's go ahead and start with the first part. Let's go ahead and jump down. Let's just look at this real quickly. We'll just kind of break this down. So we have to select. All right, so select is highlighted in blue, as you can see, because it's a keyword. Now I'm going to skip past top because we'll come back to that later. Just because we'll just discuss that later, and it's actually a keyword, and we'll go over it more in depth. And I don't want to confuse you right now. So if we tear apart this table, if we just dig into it, just click in the plus signs, and then we look at the columns. So what it's done here is it's pre-selected all the columns for us. So let's start with the first column itself. So let's just grab this. And we'll say from. So what we mean when we say from is you're saying what table is this from? And I'm just going to copy and paste this. And it gives it the full qualified path name. So there's a couple ways that we could write this. And there's also a couple ways we could write this. So let's just dive into the from first, because that's predominantly probably going to be the first thing you want to understand. So if we trail backwards on our cookie crumbs here, kind of going forward, this right here matches this, because this is the actual database that we're working in. DBO is just the type of database. This is just generic database. I'm not going to get into the schema too much because this is a basic tutorial, but this is just the schema, and we'll go over that more later in more advanced tutorials. And then finally we get into the actual database itself. So you went from, if we were to break this down, we started here, and then we opened that up, and we said, okay, here's the schema. So here's the schema, and then I want you to go inside that schema, and I want you to find this database log, which is right here. So the computer is going to say, okay, I know where that's at. Now, what do you want from that? Now, you can tell it you want everything. You can tell it you just want certain pieces. Anything that you want inside of here, you can request. So what we're doing is we're just saying, give me only the database log ID. And just to eliminate confusion, I'm just going to have our statement look just like this. So we have our telling it, say, hey, go get this. Go get this right here from here. And let's just execute. And also you might want to make sure that you're in the correct database. So if that's something else, Just switch this drop down and make sure you're in the correct database. So go ahead and execute. And we'll close that because we don't need that. And here's our data. Now, we're only grabbing the database log IDs, and this may or may not make any sense to you, which is perfectly fine if it doesn't make any sense to you. Just know that an ID is supposed to be, or should always be, a unique identifier for that particular record. So let's go back to what we did earlier, where it just pre-generated for us. We'll just right-click and select the top 1,000 rows. And we'll just kind of close that out because we kind of get it, but we don't really get it. So what do we have going on here? Well, as we see in our first query, we had that database log ID. We didn't really know what these numbers meant. So what we have here now is we have a little bit more data that's a little bit more descriptive. So let's go ahead and take a look at our columns here that we have, which the columns are right here. As you can see, they're listed right here, and here's the headers for each column, or the name of each column. So we have a post time. So what's that mean? So that's probably generally when the action occurred. When something occurred on this date, at this time, so on and so forth. And then it's going to ask the database user, DBO. It's using the schema name. Again, don't worry about that. We'll go into that more later. Again, here's another event. So what happened on this date from this user? Well, it looks like they created a table. Okay. Fair enough. Again, then we have a column called schema. Wants to know what schema this event occurred on. Next thing, we have the object itself. So it pulled data from the Adventure DataWorks, which is what DW stands for, build version. Okay. I kind of get the idea what's going on here. I'm kind of seeing how it's going. So what is this? Oh, well, this is the actual script that they performed. And it looks like they created a table. Just reading this in plain English, nothing too fancy here. We're just going to skip over most of this, but basically you kind of get the idea. This is telling you basically what function they performed. And then it has an XML event, which you can click on. And you can click on it and it gives you XML. If you know how to read XML, then you'll kind of get the idea of this. But if you don't know how to read XML, don't worry about it. This is just an example. All right, cool. So now we kind of got an understanding of how the select statement works, what we can do with it, how it works in a nutshell. So we know that this right here is our first record. All right, this is what we call a record. It's our first complete record. It's in our log. So our log is just simply tracking our executions, like anytime we run a query. Anytime we run like a query that does something significant, it's being stored here. And if we go down, we can look. We see we have about 100 records in total. So there's two things here to note. So you have this column over here. If it'll let me, that has this number, and then you have this number over here. So, as we can see, this number doesn't go in order, but this one does. So, if you want to actually count your records, there's a few things you could do. You could use a select statement to actually count, which we'll go over later, or you could just look right here. Now, we selected the top 1,000, but we only got back 100 records. Again, we'll go over top more later, but just know that this is your counter for the records that are actually displayed. Total. Now, this number right here may be different than this number. As you can see, like we're not going in order here. It's like this kind of skipped around a little bit. There is a way to order that list, and we'll go over that more in later. Again, keeping this tutorial simple. But the main takeaway from here is to understand the construction of the select statement itself. Simply requesting data. We're simply saying go out, select as our keyword, go out and get this data from this location. That's all we're doing.